Hello, and welcome to the Argyle CFO Leadership Forum, Lessons Learned in 2024. My name is Nick with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. Throughout today's event, you will also have the opportunity to win one of several prizes. So be sure to check out the Prizes and Raffle Rules tab of the interface to see how you can earn points. For those seeking CPE credit today, you must answer at least 3 polling questions and remain on the session for its duration. Polls can be found under the Polls tab on the right-hand side of your console next to Chat. Afterwards, if you are eligible to receive credit, you will receive an email with a link to your certificates. If you have any questions on credits, please email cpe@argyleforum.com. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat, and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I would like to introduce our moderator, Philip Peck, Vice President, Advisory Services and Finance Transformation Practice, Peloton Consulting Group. We're super excited to have Philip and our panelists for a panel discussion titled Finance Transformation for Success. Welcome, Philip. Over to you.
Nick, thanks so much. And greetings, everyone. I am extremely excited to be moderating this session as I think this topic is highly relevant for the FP&A and finance community. And we have 2 outstanding finance leaders here today who will share their insights and wisdom throughout the discussion. Before we get started, I do want to share just a little bit more about my background. I'm currently Vice President of Advisory Services and Finance Transformation for Peloton Consulting Group. Our company helps other organizations drive digital transformation across their enterprise. We provide advisory, consulting, and managed services capabilities across enterprise performance management, enterprise resource management, supply chain management, human capital management, customer experience, analytics, and data management for the cloud. Personally, I've spent my entire 35 plus years in my career in the FP&A, finance, and controllership domain areas, working in various corporate roles, as well as management consulting roles, helping organizations explore the art of the possible and adopt leading edge practices across the entirety of FP&A finance and controllership functions. I'd now like our 2 esteemed panelists here to introduce themselves. And Thomas, if you would go first, and then Tuan, I'll let you introduce yourself after Thomas.
Sure, Philip. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Thomas DiFabrizio. I'm originally from New York and have about over 2 decades of finance experience. I started my career with Wall Street Finance at the Bank of New York. Later, I moved to Orlando as a CFO of a travel tech company. And now, most recently, I'm CFO of a mid-market professional services company out of Atlanta, Georgia.
Thomas, thank you. Tuan, how about yourself?
I'm Tuan Nguyen. I'm the CFO at Kinevant Sciences. We are a biotech company focusing on rare inflammatory disease with a monoclonal antibody, GM-CSF, an anti-GM-CSF. I've been in finance for 20 plus years, started my career off in accounting after grad school, worked in iBanking, and then now in biotech for the last two decades.
Fantastic. So for all the participants on our webinar here, given your 2 diverse backgrounds, and I'll infuse some other perspectives based on my career experiences, I think this is going to be a great discussion. So let's dive in. First question. And Thomas, I'm going to have you answer first, and then Tuan will let you go right after him. From your experience, what are the biggest challenges finance teams face when budgeting for finance transformation initiatives, and how can these be overcome? To the extent you have some real world examples, based on your career, please go ahead and share them. So Thomas, you first.
Sure, Philip, great question. Really important topic here. I'll give you kind of a cluster of the biggest challenges, then get into kind of 2 more specific ones. So I would say the biggest challenges that finance teams face today. That includes really the underestimating of costs, the integration complexities, and the resistance to change. And so, we all know as finance folks that those hidden costs often emerge when we're doing data migration, system integration, training. Everything could derail timelines and budgets. So what I would say about that is it's essential that you overestimate your budget about 10 to 20%. And that's both on the timeline and the dollars. And I'll give you an example. When I was a CFO at a travel tech company down in Orlando, Alliance Reservation Network, we did have some scope creep when we were moving off of a legacy system to NetSuite. But the thing about that is that we decided to actually enhance the process through the initial stages of outlining the scope. And so it netted us actually a cost reduction. And so it was a net benefit, even though it was beyond our original budget scope. And then at Scholastic Book Fairs, we implemented Hyperion planning for our budgeting purposes. Our deadline was to start at the budget season. We hit it, but it was a lot of late nights. So you have to really budget over on the expenses and the timeline. Second, I would really mention, I'll let Tuan speak here. I don't want to take all the good news here, but basically securing stakeholder buy-in. Any financial transformation, it disrupts those workflows. And so you really have to have clear communications about the benefit. Like, hey, does it improve efficiency? Does it reduce errors, enhance reporting, et cetera? For example, here at CRISP, Professional Services Organization, we upgraded our QuickBooks account to include additional dimensions, which would be like pulling in Concur. So that impacted other folks that use Concur. We had to move up some deadlines in that regard. So just making sure those folks are aware. And then at Lee Head Harrison, we implemented a commission system, a cloud-based commission system. So went off of Microsoft Access and Excel. And so we just want to make sure that you get buy-in from all the sales reps and the sales leadership in that regard. And finally, just making sure everything aligns to the business goals. And so that's really the challenges there. And ultimately, at my last company, we had to get off of a legacy subledger because it was dying, and we wanted to scale the company 3-4x, and we really needed NetSuite to do that. So those are kind of like my three categories of challenges and how I would recommend handling them.
Thomas, thank you. A couple immediate takeaways just listening to you on you need to overestimate and you need to do extra planning, and whether that's timeline, whether that's resources, whether that's the actual dollars that go out the door, is a phrase I learned a long time ago. There's an element of expect the unexpected. You can only plan so much because the world changes over time, specifically for those larger transformative types of initiatives. You anticipate, you do the best planning you can, but as you suggested, building in some buffers to accommodate things that you may not necessarily know, or just being able to mitigate potential risks. I think you also highlighting, as much as we try to do the best job we can to define scope up front and make it crystal clear and get buy-in and get alignment, things change. And sometimes you open up Pandora's box and you find things you never anticipated. So you have to accommodate those. So I think those takeaways from you and your real world experiences are fantastic. Tuan, how about yourself?
Yeah, I echo everything that Thomas mentioned, but one of the things is also when you are adopting technology is to be crystal clear on what you can live with and what you can't live with in terms of like development. You can't assume going in there that the systems that you're integrating to or migrating to has all the bells and whistles that you would expect. For instance, when I was at Intarsia Therapeutics, we were the first company to do a greenfield migration from Sage ENIAC to S/4HANA, SAP, as we're moving towards manufacturing of our medical device and biologic. There were simple things in there that you assume that SAP would have, but you don't really ask. And then when you go through the migration and kick off, you slowly learn that there's certain things that adds additional cost to that. So it's clear cut what you can live with and what you can't live with.
It's interesting what you can live with, what you can't, and parsing that line. A phrase I've heard used on occasion. There's certain things that are no regrets. Like you absolutely need to have this feature functionality or capability, but being very intentional on helping the organization rationalize, prioritize, and say, we absolutely have to have this capability. And as you're describing, Tuan, you're moving to manufacturing. So that's a whole different ballgame than, say, where you were in probably your legacy system.
Yes.
It's a great takeaways. Let's keep ourselves moving here. And I want to go on to the next question. And Tuan, I'm going to have you answer this one first, and then Thomas. Considering the numerous opportunities for automation in finance, how can finance teams effectively assess which processes should be automated first?
You look at the turnaround times in terms of regular, month end, quarter end, all those manual work. What it takes, how many bodies it takes before you look into how you automate things. The idea is to remove just the daily routine items of downloading, manipulating files, and going through it in order to put it into a position that you want. Those are the first things you'll look at, just to try to streamline things. In case instead of having two bodies, you could have one.
And I think that's really important. What you're suggesting is there's the elements. They're not necessarily low-hanging fruit, but it's the block and tackle. Let's do the foundational things as well as we can. Be efficient, be streamlined, and I think you're also inferring a adage that you don't want to pave the cow path. So when you're thinking about automating things, be mindful of there might be a better way of doing the actual process before you apply automation and tools and technology and a process-centric kind of lens. And I think that goes hand in hand. Thomas, how about yourself here? Like when you're thinking about it.
Sure, Philip. Yeah, Twang, I think that was great. For me, I think very consistently with you both here, I try to figure out what we're going to automate, and I look at the processes that are going to deliver the highest impact and the efficiency gains. So you kind of got to rank order them. And to Tuan's approach, I think the time savings potential is one of them that is really important, along with volume and repetitive tasks. So got a lot of accounts payable, expense processing, or reconciliations. You want to get into those. I mentioned that Lee Head Harrison implemented a cloud-based commission system. We were doing a lot of things on a monthly basis in Excel and Access, very repetitive. And then also it was prone to error. So you want to look at error-prone areas, particularly around high sensitive things. So people's pay, you don't want to mess with that. So we decided we had to go into the cloud. So we vetted a lot of vendors and went with a company called Exactly. So it was very voluminous, has a lot of repetition, and it could be error prone. Those things you want to hit first. You of course want to ideally have some sort of a return on investment analysis. So you just figure out what things could be potentially automated in like what Tuan was saying, where you can reduce what one person did or what two people did, one person could do. And then I always like think of it like cross-functional impact, like what impacts the most business, like what's the most bang for my buck type deal. So that dovetails into the ROI, like what has the most impact on the business, and I just like chart it out and math it out, and then it's like the best ROI wins.
And so Thomas, on that one, that's interesting. I know, having led FP&A functions and being a business controller, there's elements where at the end of the day, we're the ones who have the knowledge of the business. We're the ones who can translate the world of operations and operational activity into financial statements and financial implications of any decisions. I imagine what you're describing a few things when you're doing kind of the heat map matrix of how much we invest, what is the reward, and you're suggesting, hey, think about the enterprise, not just say a function or a silo. I imagine that can be not necessarily challenging, but there's a lot of considerations when you say, I'm finance, or I'm FP&A and I'm accounting, and ideally, I want to invest in our world. I want to make it better for our practitioners, but you have to strike that balance with the entirety of the organization with, say, customer-facing types of initiatives or fundamental core, be it manufacturing or supply chain. How do you kind of tease out the deltas there and come to the best decision?
Yeah, I would say a lot of things in financial transformations comes out of necessity. I mean, it's not like not like a lot of nice to haves, like, oh, nice to have this transition. Most of it comes out of like, hey, we need to do this for X reason. Something's broken. You can't scale. Customers aren't getting what they want. So like a lot of it comes out of necessity. So so that's on top of the ROI. So if people are like, I'm not going to bite on that ROI, it's a lot of effort. It's going to remove my focus on kind of the core ideas of the business. So that's why a lot of things in finance, like systems transformations and things, they're saved for last. So that has kind of helped out. But ultimately, with the AI revolution, we know that we can't do things the way we did 5 years ago. So if you're on old systems, you really want to build your business for scale. So you need to you need the future. So you need to be thinking 2030. And so there's a lot of emerging technologies that are really going to help push the business forward. So to that, Philip, I would mention, again, a lot of times financial transformations happen out of need, but also you need to the first question that was asked, make sure that you show there's mutual benefits and mutual success in doing the transformation. So you want to get your company to 2030, and that's going to benefit everybody.
Makes complete sense. And I think hopefully that's resonating for the people in the audience here, because that's so critically important. To your point, there are certain things that it could be regulation, it could be a mandate, or it could be we're going off support of a fundamental core platform. You don't have a choice. However, you're still aiming at the idealized end state. You have your North Star. You have your future state vision to doing the things you have to do but also in alignment with that end state vision. That's really important. Let's go to our next question here. And Thomas, I'll have you answer this first here. What are the most important metrics or KPIs that should be used to evaluate the success of automated finance operations?
Yeah, so I would look for the key performance indicators that really measure efficiency, accuracy, and business value. And so for me, it would include some items I think we discussed in the last meeting, but I would say like processing time reductions. So if you can move something faster through the process, that theoretically saves time. So like for finance, if you can close the month a day earlier, okay, that's great. If you can invoice processing, if you can speed that up. So anything, the KPI would be like processing time reduction. So what savings are you getting there? I would also say, I mentioned earlier, you want to automate the error prone items. So you can have some sort of error rate reduction if your team's doing things manual and there's several errors here that you monitor on your KPI list. Things like that would help out. Like we do social media posts here and we want to have 0 errors. And so anything we can automate around that, which we track daily. If you're a business, one of my last companies, we evaluate cost per transaction. So if those things, if you could assess like the cost efficiency of automating workflows, so cost per transaction, if that helps bring that down. I would also mention Twang's comment in the previous question would be resource utilization. So if you can free up your resources to doing low value activities and now doing higher value activities, and that could be addressed on org charts. For those folks up in the IT world, I would say like system uptime and reliability. So you don't want anything, if you're in charge of websites and stuff, you don't want downtime. So things like that. As I would go through, if we have a new technology in place, like user adoption rates. So if you like at Chris, we're implementing Domo BI tool and Warehouse. So we're checking the user adoption rates. Is the team using us to the full extent? Cycle time improvements, and then the ultimate of the ultimate is the ROI. Tracking the ROI through that be a major KPI that I would look after. But and then the last one, I'll kick it over to Twang, is in the future we really want to be thinking like, what is this human and AI collaborative effectiveness? Like I've got one human here, then if I throw in ChatGPT, what's the effectiveness? So like as you move through AI machine learning transition, like what's the collaboration between human and AI? And like got to figure out KPIs. I don't have the best KPIs for that, but it would be cost savings or time savings, but evaluate around that AI and human.
Wow. Love the totality of your response, but especially that last one. To your point, there may not be the perfect metric or metrics yet, but the fact that you and the organization, as you're encouraging anyone in the audience here, it does need to be measured, because we're infusing so many things with AI, machine learning, and Gen AI we have to see the return. We have to see the benefit. So we need to start measure, monitor, track, and so forth. Tuan, what about yourself here on this question?
So the biggest KPI that we look at for anything for automation is the time it takes to close the books, right? So in public and private companies, especially when you're in a public company area, depending on what size you are, if you're a larger salary filer, you're talking about days versus weeks as a private company. And that's the big turnaround. How do you reduce that time frame? How do you reduce that turnaround? How do you reduce the error rates? Also, as Thomas mentioned, and in terms of like being audited, we're in an industry where it's not if you have it wrong, it's how wrong you are, because the sensitive nature of a lot of things we do in clinical trials. Especially when you're running a phase 3 multinational one where things are coming in different timing and all, and a lack of flow of certain data coming through on it. So
it's interesting you're referencing the phase 3 clinical trials and just the space that you live in. I've seen in the past, working with some different clients, the concept of how can we make whatever the process is as touchless as possible. So
right.
You don't have the human intervention. So when you chart out that process flow, you go, we went from 15 to 2, or whatever those numbers are, but constantly looking to go, how can we remove the need for a human intervention and just let it seamlessly flow? Still have your checks and balances, still have your reconciliations, but that's it. It's kind of the essence of cutting to the core there.
Yeah, very much so.
Okay, we'll pivot, because I think both of you have started us a bit down this journey already, but let's go there, and then we're going to eventually get to some questions, and it's great the audience is already submitting several. What role does AI or machine learning play in the future of finance transformation, and what are the risks and rewards associated with adopting new technologies? Tuan, you want to take that one first?
Sure, I'll go with the risks and rewards. The risks, that's the easy one you start off with. A lot of times, if you're an early adopter, you're not fully aware of all the issues that new technology will roll out, things that aren't being considered. We see that a lot in the area where I live in terms of new technologies that get rolled out all the time. Real world evidence is always top of mind versus something that's in a sandbox. The reward, on the other hand, is you're ahead of the curve. You're reducing time, you're reducing costs, and you're streamlining things even more. We talk about massive amount of data, in the world we live in, and being able to streamline and dissect and being able to be informed by that data is always a positive. Right? When you're adopting, and that's the idea. You're trying to make it frictionless as much as possible with everything you pull in, right? When you're talking about massive amount of data that you have through, and how do you best utilize the person? Do you want the person to do all these things manually? But the idea is to adopt these technologies as a workforce multiplier. They're more efficient. Things are easier. And then you're using their brain to do the analytics and looking at things and interpreting data versus doing the day-to-day handwork, so to say.
No, that's great. No, listening to you reminds me of a CFO who I worked with for large automotive retailer distributor with a captive finance company. One of his most essential metrics when he thought about finance transformation, automation, and now emerging AI and ML was the quality of life for everyone on his teams. He wanted them out of data wrangling, wanted them out of the tyranny of Excel spreadsheets, wanted them adding value back to the business. So it was just a fundamental KPI that he had to think about, is this furthering our overarching goal of improving that quality of life for everyone on his teams? Thomas, how about yourself on this question?
Great. Yeah, good insights there. I'll try to not mention items that were already discussed. So for me, as I think back, as far as like AI, ML kind of playing into the future life of finance transformation, I think it's really going to enable those data-informed decision makings. It's going to increase the operational efficiency, which Tuan and Philip, you mentioned. And really, I think I'm pretty good on those two, but then this one I'm really trying to hone in on. It's really enhancing the predictive capabilities. And that's where I see like really for finance, that could really be a maker there. And so around that, I think to myself, like improved forecasting and accuracy, so AI and ML, they can analyze like your historical data and identify trends that maybe you wouldn't see. Maybe you have an analyst do. So for example, like QuickBooks has an AI assist that can look through your QuickBooks and kind of throw out an estimated cash flow statement, an estimated P&L for the next year. So I really see predictive analytics and predictive features of AI to be really one that will kind of hit on those higher level senior analyst type sort of stuff. Not going to talk about the automation of repetitive tasks. Tuan mentioned that as well as I do think that some risk detection, if you're in some sort of industries that need risk or fraud detection, those things, I think those algorithms, I think will help out there. For me, it's in the past around like credit scores. And so credit scores have been great, but just like you have a profile of a certain client and then you can predict the outcome, whether they'll pay you ultimately or not by the credit score. So that's a little bit more entrenched than what we have now. But fraud prevention with cybersecurity is I think a big one there. The real-time insights, I think AI and machine learning will help us there. Everything nowadays has an AI bolt-on. So we use Domo now and has an AI bolt-on. It's really just how do you get those real-world insights right away to Twain's experience, just like increase efficiencies. And so I'm thinking more about the FP&A side versus the closing the books. As Twain already mentioned, it's very important to close the books and get the information out to the investors or the stakeholders. And then really, I see it being a benefit as far as like the scalability and efficiency. If you really want to have a business that really scales, you do need to use AI and machine learning. Like there's no way about it. You won't scale beyond the competition. And so for us, like recently, we've used Gong, Fireflies, ChatGPT, QuickBooks. So all those things, like let's say Gong joins a call, it'll summarize the call. If you're talking to a client, it'll summarize the key action takeaways. It can email out it to the client. So those things like that. Plus it allows call review if you've got managers that want to review calls. If I've got to jump on a client call or an interview or something like that, I can review the calls. So things like that. Fireflies is very similar. It's less expensive than Gong, but ultimately that's how do you implement AI and have real savings? Well, you do that by saving time, money, or gain more revenue. So those two things I'd say. As far as the risk is concerned, I think generally speaking, just the data quality dependency. So like if you don't have clean data, you're really just getting, it's like that, garbage in, garbage out thing, but it's actually to the next level because you're relying a lot more on AI and machine learning. Again, we talked at the top around like change resistance from other stakeholders. A big one for me is initial costs. I mean, when you're implementing this stuff, like I said, everyone's got an AI thing that they want to charge you for, and it's hard to quantify the return on that. And it's not, none of it's really cheap. So the initial costs, like what's the upfront cost, what we can reliably put on pen and paper over a 5-year term for as far as a payback period and ROI. And then finally, I would say just the general oversight and governance of like, how do you find errors? How do you figure out like something's interpreting something the wrong way? So those I see as rewards and some risks I'd like to highlight that kind of span my career and just generally speaking, what folks would probably figure out or go in there, whatever company they work for.
That's fantastic. I appreciate the kind of the totality of your experiences and spanning all the worlds here. My DNA is definitely more FP&A in nature. So when I think about the use cases and applications of AI, my mind goes to more of the predictive. Mm-hmm. And to your point, regardless of the software and tools and technology, virtually all of them in some way, shape, or form are now embedded with some elements of AI. So it's kind of the democratization of all these cool capabilities. When I saw recently a vendor has now multivariate stochastic predictive modeling that's AI infused. And I'm thinking back to many years ago in college when I worked on a project to build a multivariate model to predict baseball attendance. And I happened to do it on a mainframe versus now here's something that's it's at your fingertips. And yes, you need some data expertise and you have to have clean data and all that, but now it's democratized. It's here for us. And that could be the Gen AI helping you produce the management variant analysis, reducing the close cycle because now you can use AI to help you do transaction matching and account reconciliations. There's so many use cases that have a real quantifiable return.
Yeah, Philip, you were getting into Moneyball stuff with the baseball, trying to use analytics. Nice.
Well, our model actually, the outcome wasn't what we anticipated, but it was super fun. But to me, it's real, like the whole notion of multivariate modeling. So it's good stuff. Let's go on to the next question. And Thomas, you definitely touched on this, but I'd like to hear from both of you a little bit deeper. What strategies can be deployed to address any reluctance to change from employees and concerns around new technology implementations and operational changes? Tuan, have you answer this one first?
Sure. To overcome reluctance, it's basically really having a conversation of what their fears and what their resistance are, right? Sometimes people have preconceived ideas of what this thing does, right? And then also you have to be able to really talk and ask, what is it that you would like to see? What is your pain point? And to see if that piece of technology that you're adopting will ease that. That's the last thing people want, is adopting a piece of technology that causes more work on their side, causes more friction overall, not just intermediate, but across the overall organization, especially when you're dealing with in more of the IT and IT security portions. How much more work are you putting on their plate, and how can you minimize that before a successful adoption? And then also overall training, right? Do you have a robust training plan going forth if you're going to adopt this versus a one-stop shop, half an hour? And how's that education pathway keeps on growing? And sometimes you'll end up having somebody that will be the flag bearer. They'll help adopt that technology.
No, that's great. I know for our firm, who does a lot of work helping organizations drive digital transformations, and specifically some of the more emerging technologies, it's that much more important, as you highlighted, to explain to every single individual impacted by the change why are we changing? What does it mean for them in their day-to-day activities supporting the organization? And your last point around training can't be monolithic. It can't be the same for everyone. You have to meet them, in a sense, halfway at times. And not that you have a customized training for every single individual, but you need to adapt, because people learn, embrace or not embrace at different paces. Like some just get it. They're the advocates and the champions, and they run up the hill with the flagpole. And you're like, okay, we're there. Others are resistant to change. It's just human nature. So you have to find a way to meet them to ultimately be successful. Thomas, how about your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think y'all covered it quite well, to be honest. So I would just go down my list that I kind of got in my mind here. So as far as like reluctant employees and concerns, what would I do? I'll give an example. So you mentioned clear communication of benefits. So while at Scholastic Book Fairs, we implemented Hyperion planning forecasting. And so what that meant was we get with the leadership team and say, to Twang's point, like, what's your pain points and how do we solve it? So Hyperion planning, what does it solve? It saves people time and effort. We're now out of Excel. And we can pre-seed the budget inside the system. It's a cloud system. You don't have to have an Excel thrown around the company. Everyone goes on a website. So really highlighting the things that will make their life easier is really the most important thing. What's in it for them? Like a lot of people just want to know what's in it for them. And as a finance lead, you want to make sure that you're leading with that as for clear communication. I would say in some areas, to ease the concern, you do a phased implementation approach. So if you've got multiple system rollouts, like for us here, for rolling out a new antivirus system technology to our teams, it's going in a phase approach to say like, hey, we're not going to take down the company with this one update. So if you've got something that you're trying to implement that is an enterprise level thing, do it in phased approach to make sure that people are eased concern. I'd also mention the early involvement in key stakeholders, and the early is the important one, because sometimes you bring people in the very last and then it just upsets people. So you want to bring them way early on. You want to find a champion. And then to your point about the training programs, I won't talk about the client facing, team facing. I would say your own. You need to have a comprehensive own training program within your team if you're finance leading this. So like a lot of that stuff can be baked into the contract. So if you're getting a Hyperion planning, cloud-based commission system, update to a data warehouse platform, a business, you just work that into the contract that they have certifications. So make it so like you can have a third party, either one help with the training, get that baked into the contract, and or provide certification training for your team, and then kind of the key players, key stakeholders, so that everyone is on the same page. And then the last one I'll mention here that wasn't really mentioned is this regular feedback loops. Hey, how's it going? Make sure that the executives aren't caught off guard, because they'll be thinking, oh, it's been 3 weeks, I haven't heard anything, nothing's happening. But like, everything, you're just like a duck, just like paddling underneath the water, getting crazy, moving things forward. So just regular feedback loops are important. Make sure everyone's on board with what's going on, and of course bring up any issues as soon as they come up for if it needs a conversation.
That's great. That's great. All of those are fantastic points, especially that last one, transparency and visibility. Bad news never gets better. So to the extent you need to share something that's not idealized and not perfect, well, let's get it out into the open. Let's have a risk mitigation plan. Let's course correct or whatever we need to do. But having that completely open and continuous communication is key. All right. Gonna have one last question before we hit some Q&A, because there's some very, very interesting questions that have been posed. So question here. What does a successful finance transformation strategy look like? And how can you ensure technology investments are aligned with broader business goals to ensure cross-departmental collaboration? Thomas, you first on this one.
Wow. Yeah, I would say that anything that you want to implement, you make sure that you have a really solid business case for it. And the business case should really be 2 pages. 1 page is just the reason why you're doing it. And so why do you do it? Who are the key stakeholders? Why is it important to you right now? And the next page is all about the finances. And so I would just say, just trying to align the two and make sure that they run together, and you just follow up on that.
That's great. That's great. Tuan, what about yourself here on this question?
Well, it's providing the overall roadmap of rolling out any technology. How's that impact broadly the entire organization, and then it's at where the executives and the board wants you to be in 5-10 years down the road before you adopt and put in place technology. The last thing you want is to reverse something out midway on that, and just having clear alignment overall. For instance, when during the commercialization of our drug, right, not only did we have to go on S4 HANA, but in terms of what technology can enhance some of the things that S4 HANA is doing. Basically our commission systems. We also have a heavy regulatory element to our industry. And what is that adoption rate in terms of, we use VivaVault, and VivaVault not only maintains all the regulatory filings, but there's also regulatory filings for, what can you say commercially, right? What does that mean? How do you, disseminate that? Those are all costly things. And if you were going into commercialization and then the decision from the board was you're gonna license it off and somebody else is commercialized, those are systems that you're not gonna need full function wise. So it's really, what does the future hold? Is that aligned with your shareholders, your board, and all the other stakeholders that you have?
No, those are pearls of wisdom. I think you're also strongly suggesting is there's an initial alignment, kind of precedes the bigger transformation, but you have to constantly monitor and check in and update and stay aligned with the broader strategy and objectives, but also the operational reality of wherever you are in your journey as an organization. So we do have some time for some questions. And before we wrap up at the end, I'll have you kind of give us your top 2 to 3 takeaways for everyone in the audience. So this is an interesting question posed, and Tuan, I'm going to ask you first, and then Thomas, I'll have you weigh in as well. Are you planning for a worst case scenario, firm, industry, and society, of an AI future? And if so, how?
I could talk to worst case scenario in my industry right now. A lot of companies have launched AI and machine learning in terms of developing new drugs and new things. So the worst case scenario is, having AI, having machine learning develop certain assets to go through, but there's no human element, no human testing. We're in an extremely complicated, difficult industry where even animal models can't predict everything. And it's that it becomes a recursion, right? Something doesn't work, we just keep on trying the same thing over and over again, versus having real human touch and real data on there. So we're seeing that in this industry in terms of the adoption rates for a lot of AI companies, but we're also seeing at the same time that a lot of drugs that are going into or first in human trials are not succeeding whatsoever. So what does that mean overall? There is a place for AI, but the argument there's still probably not enough data for AI to be as predictive as needed. And even though we have large data sets out there. So
that definitely sounds specifically for your industry.
For ours,
It's rapidly evolving, and there's large elements of uncertainty. So you the industry are trying to figure it out, and you're obviously doing the best you can with the promise of AI, but also the considerations and the cautionary winds surrounding it. Thomas, what are your thoughts on this question?
Yeah, so we definitely do scenario planning, and so kind of the not being in the biotech, meaning professional service industry. Honestly, when someone says, "Are you preparing for the worst case scenario?" that is subjective, and it depends on how you look at it. Because in some cases, when you own the business, technology coming in and taking people's job could be a good thing, because you're now more profitable. So it depends on how you look at it. But all jokes aside, we do scenario planning. Now we're really planning and trying to hit hard the next 5 years. And so I really think that the major transformations will happen 10 years from now, so another decade. So we do have, low, medium, high. But quite honestly, I mean, I'm not sure what the worst case is, because for us in the professional service, we service law firms, business coaching and stuff. That would allow us to effectively serve more clients more efficiently. So probably the evolution of AI will help the business as far as profitability, whereas I could see some other folks in other areas could be potentially pushed out of the market by AI. So that's while we scenario plan, at least in my current role, AI is not interpreted as something that would put us out of business. We're trying to wrangle it to be something that will propel us into 2, 3, 4x growth.
Makes complete sense. So highly complementary, or factors of X squared, a significant multiplier on projecting or facilitating your growth trajectory. Another AI related question. It sounds like virtually everyone wants to talk a lot about AI here. And Thomas, I'll have you tackle this one first. From your experience, what are the latest advancements in AI and automation technologies that are most relevant to finance functions? And how can these technologies be leveraged to improve efficiency and accuracy?
Yeah, so from my perspective, specific for finance, it would be the prevalent nature of all these accounting systems having AI assistant bolt-ons. I mentioned a little earlier, particularly around the forecasting and the analysis. So right now, if you attach your historical financials, it can seed your next 12 months forecast. It can identify trends in your accounts as long as your chart accounts are clean. As far as like, hey, this month, your utilities is 3 times as much. What's going on? Do you have a water leak? So I see, as far as the finance side, using the inherent Oracle, Sage, Intact, Xero, QuickBooks AI feature there to help out with the forecasting. I know Twang mentioned earlier that if there's things that could be done with the closing the books faster. But I feel that's more around automation and less around my mind, which is like AI, which is like helping you predict and analyze results. And then also, I would say from a BI situation, visualizing your financials for your team and helping them understand that there's a financial impact to everything that they do. So I would say AI would help as far as, for example, if you connect Domo to QuickBooks or you connect Domo to HubSpot and you're showing your cost per acquisition, things like that, that in the finance, you'd want to display the financial metrics for your company in a better way that you can make better, faster data-informed decisions. So I would say those two features, one being the inherent financial system AI capabilities, and then second, a secondary BI tool to use to combine systems and show financial impacts of the indicators that your company's working towards.
Great response. You triggered some thinking, the way that you're talking about the interoperability of the systems in the ecosystem of the organization. Something that I know I've seen recently with some of the different vendors, they'll call it predictive cash forecasting. So traditionally in FP&A, you kind of did an indirect cash flow and it was good enough. But now with some of the new systems and the interoperability of data and access to the data with a little bit of AI into it, being much more predictive on a direct basis as to where you're going to land with cash, because you can look at the patterns, you can make it as specific as you need to, tiering your customers and different things of that nature. But that's exactly what you're speaking to. It's just so much more powerful and accessible now as we think about, leveraging the newer things into AI and automation. We just have a few minutes here, and maybe what we'll do is kind of some parting thoughts. And Tuan, I'll let you speak first. Kind of if you were to kind of read out to the audience here and say, what are the 2 or 3 takeaways that you would encourage them, lessons learned or leaning into the future? What would those things be?
The first one is to get just overall collaboration of all the business owners across the spectrum, right? That is the big thing. How does it impact them? What does it mean overall when you do an adoption of new technology? Any new technology can die if a stakeholder does not or is resistant to that adoption, right? And it could be a key stakeholder, or it could be somewhere in periphery that you still need what they do. So overall, that's the first thing. It's just collaboration and being able to basically listen and hear everybody. Second, it's like, how does it benefit everybody, and what's the overall cost, right? You have to get that down as a finance person. What's the overall cost on this? So.
No, that's you can never lose sight of that, because it's that's our role. It's the fiduciary responsibility we have as finance practitioners. Thomas, what would your top 2 to 3 takeaways for the audience here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say it's really about reshaping the processes, empowering your teams, and really driving that business value. So for me, it's really 4 key areas. So one, the strategic vision. All right, make sure that your investment is aligned with your business goals. Second, what Twang led off with was make it a people-centric approach, okay? If you want adoption, you got to make sure that you prioritize change management and involve the key stakeholders. Third, continuous improvement. It's not a one and done. Once you implement an AI tool, it's not over. So just make sure that you regularly evaluate, information and change course accordingly. And finally, being in finance, you want to focus on value creation. Just make sure you're enabling your team to increase value for the organization and for the stakeholders.
Love it. It's a wonderful wrapper. So I want to thank you both for your insights, experiences, and wisdom throughout the discussion. I know personally for me, there's a couple gems and takeaways that I know I'll incorporate into what I do working with clients. Thanks to all the participants who joined the session. And Nick, with that, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Great. And thank you guys for such an insightful panel discussion. And I want to thank everyone else for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. As a reminder, please be sure to check out the prizes and raffle rules section to see how you can earn points for the chance to win one of several prizes. Our next session will begin at 12:45 p.m. Eastern Time, which will be a thought leadership titled Mixing Intelligent Automation great process design, and the most comprehensive financial truth into the right financial transformation cocktail. Please click on the join button that will appear on your screen to be redirected to the next session, and we look forward to seeing you there.